A very good evening. You're watching India Global. I'm Gaurie, Dwivedi. Over the course of the next 60 minutes, we get you all the news, the views, the big stories. But first up, the headlines. The Los Angeles unrest continues as immigration raid unrest intensifies. Donald Trump deploys 700 Marines to respond to the LA protests. California sues Donald Trump's administration for deploying the National Guard. Another Chinese scientist arrested at US airport, accused of smuggling biological material. And Han is the third Chinese national arrested in less than a week. US resumes visa processing for foreign students at Harvard University. The student visa processing resumes after court blocks Trump's ban on Harvard. Iran threatens Israel with treasure trove of secret files. Iran says that secret Israeli nuclear files will be unveiled soon. How will this impact the entire Middle East calculus? We decode. And shocker coming in from Austria, where 10 dead in a school shootout incident, including the suspect. At least 30 have been injured and are being treated in the hospital after the mass shooting incident. Our top story on India Global today. Another foreign researcher and their biological threat that it poses. A third Chinese national has been arrested, viewers, in the US. This time, in fact, it's at Detroit Metro Airport on Sunday evening. She's accused of smuggling live worms into the United States for research at the Michigan University. Officials are calling this a part of a growing agro terrorism threat that's emanating from China. This comes less than a week after two other Chinese nationals, researchers, were charged with smuggling biological pathogens to study at the University of Michigan lab. The FBI, the ICE, and Homeland Security are now investigating and getting deep into this investigation, which is now taking a 360-degree view, probing links between foreign state-backed labs and American research centers. Now, what is really at stake here? What can we expect going forward? And will this mean a reset as far as how America views biological warfare? This report has answers to all those questions.
An arrest that reads like a spy thriller, only this time the danger isn't a secret code. It's biological material and it's real. A Chinese scientist arriving from China was arrested this past Sunday at Detroit's airport. The charge? Smuggling biological material into the US. According to federal authorities, the scientist had previously shipped samples to a lab at the University of Michigan, not in official containers or with permits, but hidden inside books. Her research, tied to worms, may seem benign, but the method was anything but. This is the second such case in just days. Last week, two Chinese nationals were charged with attempting to smuggle toxic fungus, Fusarium graminearum, into the country. That fungus can devastate harvests, cripple supply chains, or worse, end up in food.
Fusarium graminearum is a worldwide distributed pathogen. It infects wheat and corn and other crops, and it does have the potential to produce toxins, mycotoxins, that can impact the feed quality.
Experts NDTV spoke with highlighted the importance of ramping up new security measures to counter potential bio-threats.
The issue is more that how easy is it for someone to smuggle in material, potentially dangerous biological material, through the post? And what other ways can Trojan horse attacks be conducted on any nation? And I think it's a wake-up call for every country that we really need to ramp up the measures to detect and prevent these kind of Trojan horse.
Biological threats don't always come in the form of a virus. Sometimes they arrive in an envelope, hidden, smuggled, weaponized. In 2001, 5 Americans died in the anthrax attacks when letters laced with deadly spores were mailed to media offices and lawmakers. That bioterrorism event, however, changed how pathogens were viewed, not just as health threats, but as tools of war. With multiple incidents involving foreign scientists and biological material, authorities are asking, are these isolated cases of scientific misconduct or something more calculated and sinister? With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
The big questions that we are posing on this, well, first and foremost, what safeguards are actually in place to prevent foreign biological smuggling to take place? Is this a coordinated state-backed program that is being undertaken? Remember, these are Chinese researchers, and the American establishment feels that it could be part of a larger nexus. And how vulnerable is American agricultural sector to targeted biological threats? That's an important aspect to really understand what kind of guardrails should be in place. And lastly, is this another instance of a biological warfare being unleashed by China? And let's get in Brahma Chilani to answer some of those questions for us. Mr. Chilani, the fact is that there is now a pattern that has come to light. There are now 3 Chinese researchers that have been caught in less than a week's time, indicating that there's a pattern and there's a coordinated effort here.
Yes, in the US, this is raising a lot of concern and also getting a lot of media attention. But if these alleged attempts by Chinese nationals to smuggle dangerous agricultural pathogens into the US, coupled with existing US-China geopolitical friction, all this is intensifying bilateral tensions and raising concerns about potential agro-terrorism. But if China can do this, and I'm saying these are alleged attempts, if China can seek to smuggle dangerous agricultural pathogens into the US, it could also do that in relation to India. The Indian system is, in fact, even more porous than the American system. So we have to ask ourselves as to how we can prevent such acts of agro-terrorism if indeed these attempts were agro-terrorism. But certainly what we're seeing now is a renewed focus on China's biological weapons program. China is a signatory to the Biological Weapons Convention, which prohibits countries from pursuing biological weapons. But you would recall that when investigations into the origins of the COVID virus were undertaken.
Just that, Dr. Chilani, that when the origins of COVID virus were being investigated, China refused to provide access to its labs. So it can be signatory to many pacts, but at the end of the day, it cannot be trusted.
You're absolutely right. Which is, in fact, in January 2021, the US State Department, in a fact sheet publicly released, said the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the lab that was working on coronaviruses, the US State Department said that this particular lab was actually engaged in military programs relating to research on coronaviruses. In other words, according to the US State Department, China was engaged in offensive biological weapons research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But the key question is this: how do you protect the agricultural sector? Because you can protect your financial infrastructure, you can protect your military infrastructure, but farms are spread across every nation. So protecting the agricultural sector is very difficult, which makes biological attacks on crops or livestock much easier to carry out, because these attacks go undetected.
Absolutely.
And are difficult to trace.
And probably they come to light when damage has been done. Final question I want to ask you is that these are instances that are not only limited to US. It could happen to any country, anywhere. You mentioned India as well. Do you think some sort of a uniform guardrail needs to be in place?
Certainly, but the problem is this, that international law is weak against the powerful states because there is no enforcement mechanism. How do you enforce international law, especially against the powerful states? So what happens is this harsh reality. International law is powerful against the powerless, but powerless against the powerful. So even if you have international conventions and treaties, there is no enforcement mechanism. So the powerful can actually abuse international norms, they can flout international norms, and they can engage in activities which are antithetical
Indeed.
to customary international law and even to international morals and international rules.
Absolutely. I'm going to leave it there. Pramachilani, always a pleasure to have you on the show to discuss what is now becoming increasingly clear that there could be biological warfare that China may have unleashed on US. All right, shifting gears now to another important story. Well, as far as China's rare earth curbs are concerned, a wake-up call to the world. That's how Union Minister Piyush Goyal described China's rare earth export curbs. As India scrambles to build alternate supply chains, Goyal warned that China's stranglehold on 90% of the world's magnet production has rattled sectors, whether it's automobiles, whether it's appliances. But India's response has been swift. I want to first play out that soundbite, and then we come back and talk more about what could be India's blueprint.
In a way, it's a wake-up call for all those who have become over-reliant on certain geographies. It's a wake-up call for the whole world that you need trusted partners in your supply chain.
India's blueprint, a three-pronged push, diplomatic pressure on China, hunting for new global suppliers and turbocharging local tech. And there's action on the ground. Startups and industries are rising to the challenge with innovation and not just subsidies.
We are working on several other tracks to see the availability from alternate sources, to look at our Indian Indian Rare Earths Limited, providing the necessary materials to be able to speed up the development of our own products.
The road ahead may be bumpy, but India's gears are shifting. Moreover, viewers, Beijing may hold the magnets, but New Delhi is building the momentum. Let's get in Amirullah Khan, who is, I'm told, a trade expert, to talk more on this. Mr. Khan, now the fact is that as things stand right now, China's hold over rare earths is now disrupting not just India, but global supply chains. What do you think we should be doing to be able to address these issues?
Well, what is very clear is that China is using this monopsony that it has over rare earth to negotiate hard. The real issue is China-US trade. And just to ensure that that trade gets back to some kind of an even keel, China is going to act tough. And when it acts tough with the US, it will willy-nilly act tough with other countries. And therefore, while we in India do not really have a tussle or a problem with China, we will suffer only because the US is not going to negotiate easy. And you will see that what's happening in London is a pure reflection of that, where both the parties are digging their heels, expecting each other to make a large number of concessions. So as far as India is concerned, and there are just two ways out. One is that hope that the US and China cut a good deal. And secondly, that we do a bilateral deal ourselves and ensure that while China has problems with the US and goes around and does whatever it can to increase or get back their export, because China, the big threat to China has been that after this trade war started, China's exports to the US have taken a plunge like never before. And that is a problem for China. And therefore, they're going to use everything to ensure that those exports go up, and all the curbs that are happening on technology, all the issues like the Huawei controls and so on are eased. But be that as it may, as far as we are concerned, we will have to ensure that we do a series of conversations with China on our own.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks much for joining me on the show. At the end of the day, this is something that India will have to address, simply because it's not just about economic interests, it's also about national interests being protected. I'm going to take a quick break, come back on the other side, viewers, with a lots more on the other side in terms of stories that we'll be tracking. The other story that we are tracking on the show, Iran's intel minister says that his government is in possession of sensitive Israeli documents. Now, what does this mean? It means nuclear secrets, possible nuclear secrets of Israel in Iranian hands. How will that change the landscape of the Middle East political landscape is the key question. Diplomatic ties with the US, Europe, all likely to be impacted. Broader defense capabilities of Israel could be on the line, because these are not just secrets. This is, in fact, a blueprint about how Israel is looking to protect itself now and going forward. Now, how is this going to change? Can Tehran actually go ahead and release those? What does it stand to gain? What's the kind of leverage it's looking to achieve by holding on to that? And of course, what's really at play here. Let's get in James Bowden, who is a Middle East expert, to talk more about this. James, I want to understand from you the kind of leverage that Iran thinks it has, because that's the whole point here. It would like to have certain leverage when it's saying it is threatening to release those files. What is really at play here?
Well, I think that the Iranians would benefit most from their ability to give this information to Turkey, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. They would be able to share this information, and they would likely be able to help these other countries understand the core secrets of the Israeli nuclear force. And that's not really the technology, because nuclear technology is nuclear technology. I mean, it's pretty much obvious. And a lot of the targeting systems and those types of things are very routine. What is at the core of these documents may be nuclear doctrine. When will nuclear weapons be used? Under what conditions? You know, a lot of key strategic concepts may be in these documents. And with that knowledge, Iran and these other countries can tailor how they're going to approach Israel, and how will they threaten them? How far can they get to that nuclear response threshold, but not cross over it? And that's a very big piece of the pie. I would say that more than anything else, that's what Israel really fears. Some of their nuclear strategy got out after the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and that was called the Samson option, in which Israel would use nuclear weapons if Arab forces got within a certain mile range of Jerusalem. And so that's the kind of thing that they have been trying to not let out of the bag. Israel is a very secretive country. There's a joke that in the Middle East, even the weather is a national secret. And so for them to lose control of their strategic doctrinal thinking is a big deal.
I'm not even getting into the kind of intel failure this is, because that itself should leads to many questions and a high-level probe. But I want to understand from a larger impact to the region point of view. This also comes in the wake of uncertain dynamics, for want of a better word, uncertain dynamics between the US and Israel, right? I mean, there's frustration on the Trump administration side. There's a certain hardening of a position on Mr. Netanyahu's side as well. In the backdrop of that, how do you see the renewed security threats that Israel may face if these documents were actually leaked?
Well, it would result in a reduction of intel sharing. There is what is called the Five Eyes. So there are 5 countries in which intelligence is routinely shared. And this would lead to a reduction of that intelligence sharing. And that's a very scary thing for Israel. Israel But even the U.S., Israel and the United States cooperate very closely with sharing intelligence. In fact, there's a belief that the FBI and other agencies have what's called a fusion center in Israel, which brings together massive volumes of intelligence and process it in order to avoid another 9/11 attack. And so if Israel or the United States were to feel that they couldn't trust either with their intelligence and with the information they're sharing, then it can weaken that strategic partnership. And that's a big fallout. And that also extends to Europe. Everybody is now going to be questioning and examining and wanting Israel to prove up that they have secured and tightened down access to this information. And so it may damage in the short term how Israel is able to conduct business with other countries.
And at the end of the day, do you think, James, this is going to be, of course, some sort of a possibility for Iran to push back on the renewed sanctions that are being talked about? I mean, that's leverage, right? They would want that they are able to push back on the additional sanctions that are being proposed on Iran right now? And will they be successful in that?
I'm not sure how much leverage in the nuclear talks it will give them. I mean, it may give them some, but again, the intel sharing and, with being able to spread it abroad, that's the bigger thing. I just don't see that as being as big a factor. We're really at loggerheads over the issue of enrichment. Now, they may say, we can hold off, we can not share this if you allow us to have enrichment, but then, there's no reason for a deal at that point. So, again, I think the real leverage that Iran has is just their ability to share it out with these other countries and how it would force Israel to go back and change all of that. They're going to have to modify policy and modify security systems. And that takes time. There are people who are removed from the system. There's accountability. And it can distract from the other issues of the day.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks much for speaking to me on India Global, a story that has major political and economic ramifications and, of course, stability of the region. Shifting focus now to another important story. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has said that trade talks with China are going well as both sides meet for a second day in London. Discussions are focused on resolving tensions over export controls, especially with regard to rare earth minerals. We spoke about that because they're critical to global supply chains. China controls most of them. And if America doesn't have access to it, then it impacts its industrial manufacturing and several economic views as well, and economic forecasts. The talks follow a tentative Geneva deal and a recent call between President Trump and President Xi Jinping. Investors are watching closely with hopes that the negotiations will ease economic strain and avoid further escalation between the two sides. Massive overnight drone attack by Ukraine has temporarily grounded flights across major Russian cities, including Moscow and St. Petersburg. Russia's defense ministry claims it shot down 102 drones, nearly half over the Bryansk region bordering Ukraine. No damage has been reported. Air traffic was suspended at over a dozen airports, including all serving Moscow airports. There are 4 of them and several in St. Petersburg. Flights resumed in most places, but disruptions remain. A quick break. We return with more stories on the other side. Stay with us. Tensions remain high in Los Angeles as demonstrators took to the streets for a 4th straight day, protesting a controversial series of immigration raids and the Trump administration's hardline approach when it came to enforcement. The situation escalated significantly this week when Trump ordered the deployment of the National Guard, a move that quickly sparked political backlash. The state of California is now suing the federal government, arguing that the president's decision to send in troops was made without the state's consent. Adding fuel to fire, a senior White House advisor publicly suggested the possibility of arresting state officials, including the governor, over the protests. Now, Trump has since expressed support for those remarks, intensifying an already heated clash between federal and state leadership. The Pentagon is also deploying 700 Marines, and many view this display of military force as a dramatic and symbolic moment. What some are calling the showdown the White House has been waiting for. Well, those were the words of the governor. Let's get in now the big questions that we are posing on the show. First up, is this the new normal as far as the Trump administration is concerned in dealing with the illegal immigration issue? Will courts be the final arbitrator? Because California governor has questioned the legality of Trump administration's decision to deploy the National Guard, because that comes under the governor's purview. So will the courts be the final arbitrator here? And lastly, is this now a state versus federal government issue? Is this now what it's turning out to be, a state versus federal government issue, which is where the buck really needs to now be decided? Also comes in a year ahead of the midterm polls, which is what Trump administration would be eyeing. Glenn Carl as well as Ray Locker joins me more on this. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Let me start with you, Mr. Carl. The fact is there are several legs to it. There is the political aspect to it, the security aspect to it, the messaging aspect to it. I'm going to try and cover as much ground as possible. But Mr. Carl, where do you stand on those very dramatic visuals that came in of a first world country looking every bit third world?
Well, America is not a stranger to demonstrations and sometimes violent ones. So from that extremely narrow perspective, I'm not especially alarmed. But this is, I think, a far more alarming situation for the country, for the United States, for American democracy, than even those who are concerned about the issue and focused on it understand. Immigration is the proximate issue, and it's an important one. And I agree with how you framed this, that the Trump administration is setting this up to be able to carry out its deportation policies related to illegal immigrants. But the issue is really much larger, and as you noted, the issue between state authority and federal, Washington authority, is fundamental to how American democracy functions. And the Trump administration has been setting this up quite clearly to carry out its policies that are called the unitary theory of executive power, which really undermines the foundations of American democracy. So this is an historical significant issue, and the states can appeal to the courts, but the federal government is pushing to control the power, and that is a critical issue.
Ray, comment on the other aspect, which is that a lot of people feel that this is essentially now a blue versus red political fight, and immigrants, illegal, are just caught in the crossfire.
Well, I think that's a part of it. I mean, look, we've had illegal immigration in California and the rest of the country for decades now. It's always been that way. California runs on illegal immigrants. I mean, they do many of the jobs that Americans don't want to do. So that's nothing new. This is a power grab by Trump. A deliberate provocation. They sent people in to do raids at places where they know the illegal immigrants congregate, like in Home Depot parking lots. And then they rousted them and they caused trouble. And now they've set up this provocation to justify bringing in the Marine Corps, who are totally not needed. Neither is the National Guard. And on the demonstrator side, the smartest thing they could do is quit burning cars and get out of there and quit waving Mexican flags. They're a deliberate provocation to the people who have been brought in. And that can diffuse a lot of this. But Trump wanted this. He's wanted this for a long time. As you can see, he's saying all sorts of crazy stuff about, arresting Gavin Newsom. He has no call to do that. And so this is part of his continued power grab. We've seen it since January 20th. And, they want to push it as far as they can go.
Okay. Mr. Karl, then let me also now ask about the other aspect, which is the security aspect of it. Some of these unprecedented visuals is the reason why the Trump administration has justified, whether it's the Marines, whether it's the National Guard. Is this the new normal now in America, and irrespective of which government is in power?
Well, I would say it is the new normal, which is hideous, but I would disagree fundamentally and quite strongly with your last phrase, which was that irrespective of who is in power. Not at all. This is all directly linked to Donald Trump and now the Republican Party. And that is not a partisan statement. That is simply an objective summary of what has happened, in fact, for the past decade, frankly, for the past 40 years, but especially during the Trump era, which from 2015 on, let's say. So new normal, this is a clear, there is a clear, coherent, cogent, and focused drive by the ideological leaders or thinkers in the Trump administration, the Republican Party, to centralize power in the chief executive. And that is fundamentally un-American and anti-constitutional. It implies the end of the American system of government. That is not an overstatement. If you can ignore clear laws of historical duration concerning the use of military force against American citizens, then you really have cast aside the Constitution and centralized power in the White House, which is the explicit objective of this administration. And it's in Project 2025. It has been stated. I struggled against this just as one among many federal officials 20 years ago under the Bush administration. The theory of unitary executive power is the explicit objective. This is part of it. Immigration is important, but is actually a tool to a much larger enterprise and one that is frankly revolutionary and quite dangerous.
I'm going to leave it there because it seems there are two Democrats on the show, and I don't want to be the Republican on the show, but it's unfair if we do not have the other view as well, which is the Republican view on this, those who are supporting Trump. Because at the end of the day, a discussion needs to reflect the other side as well. I'm going to leave it there. Glenn Karl and Ray Locker joining me on the show. Well, bottom line, viewers, at the end is unprecedented visuals that came in Los Angeles had three clear messages. One, a very strong political undertone, which was that the new normal in America is here, which is that protests will be clamped down the way one saw, whether it is the deployment of the National Guard or the deployment of the Marines. The second very clear message was that illegal immigration is an issue that is at the heart of the administration, and Trump will continue following it and pursuing it till the very end of his administration or till he feels the objectives have not been met. So this is probably just the beginning. It will continue going forward. And the third and the final message from there is that one can't have different rules when it comes to protests being clamped down democratically or quote unquote undemocratically. There were protests that happened in India 5 years back when Donald Trump in fact had come to India. There was a completely different view that he had taken, his government had taken them. And now there's a completely different view that's being taken by his administration. You want to clamp down on protests? Let that be the new normal everywhere around the world, not just when it suits you. On that note, a quick break, more on the other side. It's a huge reprieve for all the students who have zeroed in on Harvard University, have got their admission letters, but had no idea whether or not the visa processing will begin. There's a reprieve there because there's a legal victory that America's oldest university has achieved against the Trump administration. It's bringing hope to international students bound for Harvard. The U.S. State Department has ordered all embassies and consulates of America around the world to resume processing student and exchange visitor visas, specifically for Harvard applicants. This comes after a federal judge in Boston temporarily blocked President Trump's controversial ban on foreign students attending the Ivy League school. The judge's ruling followed mounting criticism that the ban was discriminatory and harmful to academic institutions. According to reports, the state government cited parts of the judge's decision, saying the fresh directive was in accordance with the temporary restraining order for many students around the world. It's a much needed moment of relief, though the broader legal and political fight over immigration policy remains far from over. And in fact, nobody knows about the Trump administration. Who knows, there could be yet another directive that may be challenged yet again in courts. But for now, there is a temporary reprieve for all the students. All right, shifting focus now to Apple's annual developer conference on Monday that lacked the splashy announcements that fans are used to seeing. There was nothing like the Vision Pro reveal from 2023 or the Apple Intelligence announcement last year. But there was an important software update. It's a new design language that runs across all of Apple's OS, or operating systems as they're called. The company is calling it Liquid Glass. And to decode that, Gaurav Chaudhary, or Tech Guruji as he's called here at NDTV, is here to connect the dots for you.
Well, the first major highlight of the launch event was the new naming scheme now, because right now they have not been in sync, considering the latest iOS version was iOS 18, the Watch OS was a different number, the Vision OS was a different number, but now starting this year, Apple is now keeping all of them in sync to the current year. So today it was all about the iOS 26, iPadOS 26, Mac OS 26, which is named as Mac OS Tahoe, and then again Vision OS 26, Watch OS 26 and TV OS 26. Now the first thing which was the main highlight to all these new softwares is the new liquid glass design, which gives a very consistent approach all throughout, starting from the iPhone to the Apple Watch to in fact the Apple TV experience. You talk about the new iPad experience, or in fact even in the Mac or maybe the Vision Pro, you'll have a very consistent approach. That's all thanks to the new liquid glass design. Apart from that, we have had some great improvements in Apple Intelligence. Talk about live translation for messages or calls. Well, it's pretty useful. At the same time, now we have visual intelligence to search for stuff which is present on the screen. So I think everything combined, lots new updates coming in from Apple.
I'm shifting focus now to a story where details are still sketchy and information is still being verified. So instead of making any claims that may be incorrect, I'm only going to now get the person who had seen this firsthand. Kunal Jain joins me, who's a witness and a founder of Kaushalam Foundation. He made the claim that he saw at the airport a student. Details, as I said, are still yet to come in, and we would err on the side of caution till we have an official announcement. But Kunal, I want to understand from you that you had actually put this out on social media. What's your first person account of what happened? As I said, we're going to put in some checks and balances because a formal announcement on what really happened is still awaited.
Yeah, I mean, I simply posted what I saw, right? So all the visuals are very self-explanatory what you saw. The only difference what I can say is what I saw from my naked eyes was more than what you are seeing in the pictures, because I did not take all the pictures. I did not take the whole length video or whatever. This is just simply what I could take some little bit of a snippets. I was, in the beginning, we could not understand what he was saying because everybody is not in a frame of mind that somebody is speaking Hindi and which too in a Haryanvi language. So everybody thought it's a Mexican guy and they're pinning him down, probably sending him back, because those are the visuals which are quite common at the airport. We never had this idea. When I started listening what he was saying, at that time I realized he is from India, and it made perfect sense because this flight was coming to New Delhi. So this whole scene was happening right at that moment around us, where the flight was taking off for New Delhi. So it was quite clear by the time that this is an Indian, young man. He did not want to leave. I think that was in his mind, and that's why he was kind of little violent. He was hitting his head from the wall. And then when he started doing that and he started yelling that, I am not pagal, मुझे पागल मत समझो, तुम लोग मुझे पागल बना रहे हो, मैं पागल नहीं हूँ, और बार-बार बस यही रिपीट कर रहा था दो चीजें.
Okay. So, I'll tell you why, Mr. Jain, I said I'm going to err on the side of caution, because the identity and even the nationality is yet to be officially declared, and which is why we need to maintain our checks and balances in terms of the antecedents and what really happened. You are, of course, giving a first person account in terms of what you saw that happened there. But Mr. Jain, I want to now ask you a larger question, which is around the fact that even legal immigration in the US is now becoming a matter of great scrutiny, with every case being seen and reviewed multiple times. Take the case of students, take the case of green card holders, take the case of senior citizens, H1B, across the board. As someone who's been there, do you see that this is now the new normal, the new sentiment that is going to be the case, whether it is the Trump administration or the next one?
It was always there. It's just whenever a new government takes over, they have certain priorities. And I think Trump government and administration has a priority for immigration, and it is very clear. It is all over from the very beginning. Their policy about immigration is very clear. They don't want any foreigners, unauthorized, illegal foreigners, to come into the country and take the advantage of the resources which are purely limited for, and which is a great, great policy. I'm not denying that fact. I can't comment as far as the legality of this case is concerned, or what should be the legal policy for immigration. I'm not an immigration attorney. I suggest you have an immigration attorney on the show, and he can probably answer this much better. But what the stories I hear in the newspaper, and I have about 5-6 of my family members who are in different university programs in the United States. And what they have been telling me in last 2 months, there is an influx of a lot of these cases where even if you commit a little bit of kind of, not a crime, but let's say a citation you get for the speeding, for a traffic ticket.
Yeah.
It can come on your record.
It can.
So they are becoming more and more watchful, and every act is being monitored. So that is just becoming a little bit more, kind of an advanced level of monitoring which is happening in case of foreign students.
I'm going to leave it there, Mr. Jain. Thanks much for speaking to us. I'm going to turn attention now to breaking news that's coming in on the broadcast in Austria, where a gunman has killed at least 10 people in a deadly attack at a secondary school. Let's get in Daniela, who joins us live from Austria, from the grass city where this actually took place. Daniela, what are the details that you can share with us right now of this horrific incident?
Yes, hello. I'm currently at the sports hall a few minutes away from the school where a shooting took place today at 10 a.m. in Graz in Austria. All students who were evacuated from the school are being brought here. The area around the school has now been largely cordoned off. It's a kind of gathering center which has been set up here in the sports hall. Buses with students arrive here, and then they are taken to the sports hall where their parents are waiting. Since this morning, buses have been arriving here all day. Earlier, a student collapsed on a bus. You can see everywhere parents, and the description on the parents' faces. Many of them are wearing work clothes and came after receiving the call and being informed about what happened. I've just learned a few minutes ago that the last bus with students has now arrived at 3 p.m. and there are currently no students left at the crime scene. Regarding the dead and injured, the situation is as follows. There are 10 dead people, including the shooter and the teacher. There are several dozens injured, and some very seriously. But the investigation into the perpetrator is still ongoing. Apparently, it was a young man who attended the school in the past, but his motives are currently still under investigation.
All right.
So we don't know why this happened here.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for speaking to NDTV on that horrific story. Well, viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this show. Thank you so much for watching. We come back tomorrow with more stories, more views, more perspectives.